This is Nowe Ateny, an 18th century book that is perhaps one of the strangest things ever written. Now, the writing itself is actually fairly straightforward, nothing all that unusual about it, but Nowe Ateny is supposed to be an encyclopedia. In fact, it's thought to be the first ever encyclopedia in the Polish language, and clearly represents a very experimental phase in Polish encyclopedias. For example, you know how encyclopedias are always in a very dry, matter-of-fact style of writing? Not this one. It seems the author was happy enough to just cram in any old anecdote that came into his head, often at the expense of the informational value that one would normally expect from an encyclopedia. The author was 18th century Polish priest Father Benedykt Chmielowski. This is a portrait of him that appears in the book, which I guess he was somehow okay with. Chmielowski was born in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1700 and spent his entire life there. He never travelled abroad, which you would think would make him a fairly bad candidate for writing about the facts of the world, but by his 40s he had amassed a sizable collection of books. At his fingertips he had a font of knowledge from classical, medieval and contemporaneous sources. He decided he would compile all this knowledge into one mega book from which people could learn just about anything about the world, despite not having seen much of it himself. He obviously didn't think first-hand knowledge was all that important, instead seemingly believing that if something was written in a book, then it must be true. This led him to putting all manner of nonsense in his encyclopedia, but his intentions were fairly noble. You see, some parts of the book were written in Latin, like annotations or quotes, which was fairly standard at the time as the language was still widely used by intellectuals and scholars across Europe, but the main text was in Polish, so even commoners could access Chmielowski's knowledge. Well, as long as they could read. He published the first volume of this work in 1745. Calling it Nowe Ateny, or New Athens, it contained over 900 pages, with several more volumes to follow over the next few years. The full title actually takes up an entire page, and roughly translated means New Athens, or the Academy of All Sciences, divided into various titles and classes, for the wise to record, for the idiots to learn, for the politicians to practice, for the melancholics to entertain themselves. About God, polytheism, the beautiful selection of words, about many foreign questions, the Sibyl's collection, about animals, fish, birds, about mathematics, about the wonders of the world, people, governments, politics, about languages and trees, about the elements, faith, about hieroglyphics, tales, national manners, about a country full of strange curiosities, the entire world described from the ground up in brief words, clearly, all this written at great cost and effort by the author, Benedykt Chmielowski. Little bit of patting himself on the back there, all he was short of saying was "you're welcome," but fair enough, you know, a lot of work obviously went into this, and it's pretty cool to have written the first ever Polish encyclopedia. But Chmielowski's idea of how an encyclopedia should be written is very different to how we typically view it today. Take for example the entry for horse. Wikipedia describes a horse as a domesticated, one-toed, hoofed animal belonging to the taxonomic family Equidae, and is one of 2 extant subspecies of, and so on and so forth. In Nowe Ateny, the entry for horse says, "A horse is what it is," as everyone sees. This phrase is still quoted in Poland to this day and is used as an idiom to describe something that is more obvious than it appears. It seems Chmielowski didn't have much time to waste on describing things he thought everyone would already know. Another example is the entry for goats, which Nowe Ateny describes as a stinking kind of animal. Now the entries do go on with further description, but often devolve into anecdotes or stories of dubious veracity. For example, the entry for dogs tells the following tale. A certain French duke had a dog trained in such a way that it set the table for guests. It opened the chest containing the tablecloth with a key taken from its master, and after spreading the cloth on the table, it laid out the plates, spoons, knives and napkins in the appropriate order. Chmielowski had a bad habit of including these kinds of apocryphal stories, which is basically a polite way of saying they were almost certainly bullshit, but he had assumedly read them in his vast collection of books and accepted them as true without any further rational analysis. Another animal to get this treatment was the ant, as Nowe Ateny describes an ant that lived in a market in the Persian city of Susa and ate a pound of meat every day. It's one thing to believe strange things that have been presented to you as true, but Chmielowski could have deduced this as false had he spent a single moment considering it. How would an ant eat a pound of meat every day? Where was the meat going? Was the ant producing a pound of excrement, or was its stomach acid just instantly dissolving the meat in its entirety? I guess he just believed that this was a special ant, a magical ant. That's certainly not the only appearance of magic in the supposed encyclopedia. Dragons are described in great detail, although one particular line might lead you to believe that their description is metaphorical. It's hard to beat a dragon, but you have to try. Oh, I get it. That's pretty inspirational, you might think, until Chmielowski goes on to personally attest to the existence of dragons, writing, "Dragons existed for sure. Visiting Radzivill's castle, I myself held a rib of a dragon bigger than a regular saber. Just when you think he's being clever, he writes something stupid. Like when he writes about a race of headless humans, commenting that some readers might think he himself is headless for believing such nonsense, but then defending his claim by explaining it's well documented in literature. I mean, so is Spider-Man, but whatever. I won't lambast him too much for the thoughtless regurgitation of things he read in books, because that's basically how I make videos. You read up on things, you make a video, and sometimes you get things wrong, because some of the stuff you read was, well, lies. Although I'd like to think that over the years my bullshit detector has become a lot more accurate. I guess Chmielowski just lived in a time before the bullshit detector was invented, so we can forgive him for writing things like this. How to turn around hail. Some say one has to show the hail cloud a great mirror and turn it towards the cloud. That'll make it go away. Oh, of course, why didn't I think of that? Probably because most people don't think you can manipulate the weather by making a small gesture at it, a view that Chmielowski seemingly did not share. Eric, the King of Sweden, wherever he turned his hat, the wind blew from there. Now, there had been multiple kings of Sweden named Eric by the time Nowe Ateny was written, so which one does this refer to? Who the fuck knows? Clearly Chmielowski's inaccurate writing extended to real people as well, like when he wrote about Greek philosopher Socrates. Socrates never laughed in his life. His face was neither happy nor sad. Which is a conclusion I can only imagine he came to after coming across a bust of Socrates and attempting to tell it a joke. Despite the wild, nonsensical subjects of his writing, Chmielowski seemingly wrote with absolute confidence and precision. If there was a well leading to the centre of the earth and a man fell into it, he'd fly 5 German or 20 Italian miles per minute and rest on the centre and bottom after 172 minutes. That is 2 hours and 52 minutes. In the centre of the earth, according to the Holy Fathers, hell is located, where the soul will arrive more quickly if carried by the devil. So there you have it. If you fell to the centre of the earth, you'd have just enough time to watch The Dark Knight Rises. Then you'd land in hell and think, thank God that's over. I also like that 5 German miles are equivalent to 20 Italian miles. Are Italians indolent or just prone to over-exaggeration? Mamma mia, Klaus, we walk at the 20 mile already.
You lazy Italian bastard! That was only 5 miles.
Having written 3,000 pages over multiple volumes, it might surprise you to learn that Chmielowski didn't receive much acclaim for his efforts in producing Nowe Ateny. As far as historians can tell, it doesn't seem to have been very popular, and given that it was written during the Enlightenment period, which lauded intellectualism and rationalism, it received criticism from scholars who claimed it would only spread ignorance and superstition. It's only in the last few decades that it's been seen in a more positive light, as a sort of entertaining historical curiosity. Makes you wonder if there's anything like that today, you know, something that's objectively bad at what it's supposed to be, but will be remembered fondly in the future for the failed attempts of its bumbling creator, which, while clumsy, were made in earnest. A sort of reminder of what it is to be human, and that the people of the past weren't all that different from us, that the glory is not in the triumph, but the trying, so even failure is worth celebrating. It's hard to be a dragon, but you have to try. I have a similar story about particularly bad poetry from one of history's most untalented writers, if you'd like to hear more about this sort of thing, or another story about the Codex Gigas if you're into weird old books, and a bunch of stories about all sorts of different things, and you can subscribe to see more in the future. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok if you'd like to see this stuff on those platforms, and until next time, stay safe.
Eine schweinelige gesummte Feul Kunden boten, dass dumm Woten hatten.